So, hello, folks. It's Sunday afternoon, the 5th of October, and today we'll talk about a couple of things. One of the things that we want to talk about first is the follow-on from yesterday. To gain great fruit, to gain great benefit from the Dhamma, requires practice, and that the better part of the practice is eagerness to practice, and that eagerness for practice comes from already getting benefit from practice. But if people are not practicing, they see no fruit, they see no benefit, and so they see no reason to continue to practice because they haven't started yet. That's a really important point is that we have to actually start practicing changing the mind. We have to practice coming out of unwholesome mind states into wholesome mind states. Also, we can start doing easy work. And so getting away from other people, being off on your own, is easier than when you're around other people or around the cell phone. So when the alarm goes off, you can turn the alarm off and then set the phone down, because it's easier to practice when you don't have any distractions. Getting into seclusion. The Buddha used the term going to the foot of a tree, going to an empty hut, going out into the forest, going to a pile of straw. And with the hut, the important point is that it's empty. It's not cluttered. And so getting an empty hut will help us get an empty mind, to clean things out and to only have wholesome thoughts. And one point that I would like to make is that if somebody is going to go to a gym and start lifting weights, a good trainer will have the beginner start doing dumbbells and doing reps, one after another, after another, after another. Now, the guy who's doing those reps is saying, I don't want to do reps. I want to go over and bench press 250 pounds. Well, good luck with that. We don't have the skill. We don't have the muscles developed, the mental muscles, in fact. And so we need to get away from it all to start practicing having one wholesome thought after another, after another. Now, I actually mentioned that it would possibly be a good idea to start counting how many wholesome thoughts in a row that you can have. That would be like counting the reps, so that you can start having a whole lot of wholesome thoughts without any unwholesome thoughts in between. In Sutta number 19, the Buddha talks about it in the sense of having one wholesome thought after another, after another, after another. Wholesome thoughts, one after another. And this needs to be practiced rather than having the mind just all over the place or whatever, that we're actually beginning to train the mind into having wholesome thoughts. And as we train the mind having wholesome thoughts, it begins to change our attitude. Because really, what the sutras are really talking about, gladdening the mind, is not actually just saying happy words, but it actually has the quality of changing our attitude, to begin to have a happy, wholesome attitude, one wholesome thought after another. That you can begin to see this when you begin to see how your thoughts affect your attitude, but then the attitude begins to affect your thoughts. They work together like that. And so if you develop by gladdening the mind, you can have a lot of healthy thoughts come up, which starts to develop that attitude of, I can do this, that attitude of, we've got this. The attitude, in fact, of no matter how much of a hindrance or unwholesome thoughts come up, I can catch those and throw them out and come back to reality and see things the way that they really are. This is the attitude. Ivan, go ahead.
Yeah, Dhammarato. I never thought about this before. But like using the gym analogy, usually when people wants to lift heavier weight, one of the recommendation was like you kind of lift the heavier weights but with lower repetition. Like I was thinking like going back to the wholesome thought, like it would be sort of like having a really high quality wholesome thought, like something that the mind usually is not used to, and just like really have few of them. Like it's sort of like getting used. I don't know. It was just something that I thought of because that's usually how the advice of weightlifting goes. Like you intentionally lift a heavier weight, but with fewer reps. Yeah.
Okay. Let's put it then this way. The weight itself is in fact heavy, and that you need the strength to be able to pick it up, but that your strength is not strong. So now let's use the analogy that those heavy weights are like heavy dukkha. And we're going to be doing a whole lot of lightweight repetitions to build up the muscles so that when a heavy piece of dukkha comes by, we can lift it up. But we're not going to start doing major reps with it. We need to stay away from heavy dukkha. But when heavy dukkha does come by, we can, in fact, handle it. So this is
Yeah.
a better way of thinking about it. Is that the repetitions without the easy reps that don't have much resistance to it is to help build up the muscles so that we can go and live our lives and see all of that dukkha all around us and only occasionally pick it up easily. That in fact possibly going a little bit further, we can say that once one develops the wisdom of seeing what's heavy, seeing those big heavy weights, we kind of avoid lifting them altogether. We don't put up with it. All right. So this is the way of seeing the dukkha is by starting to have very little resistance so that when we're building these reps, doing one wholesome thought after another, that builds the skill, it builds a mental strength so that no matter how heavy that dukkha gets, going back to that point, we can have the attitude as I can, in fact, set that weight down. I don't have to pick it up. And if I do pick it up and it's heavy, I can set it back down because I have the strength to be able to set it down easily, handily, no problem, no worries. Okay. So this is the whole point is that we want to stay away from heavy dukkha. That in fact, the whole point then has really to do with this attitude, the attitude of I can handle that dukkha. Number one, if I'm really wise, I don't pick it up. But if I am not wise and I do put it up, let's have the wisdom to set it back down and not carry that burden around with us. That's the way of looking at it is that, yeah, we can use the analogy of the gym, but it only goes so far because what we want to do is to see that big, heavy dumbbell or barbell as not worth picking up and carrying it around. But we do have the reps of being able to do it over and over again. That in fact, there's really no reason to test how strong we are because we already know that we're strong enough to handle the dukkha. So there's no reason to go test ourselves. That it's better for the senior monks just to stay in the wat. That we can say that that old monk is so highly developed in the skill of the Dhamma, he can go out into the community, go to the wrestling matches, go to the bars, and not have to pick anything up. No, he's wise enough not to go to the wrestling matches, not to go to the bars. So we need to actually put this on a major point that we actually need to practice in order to get benefit out of the Dhamma. That the Buddha says that practicing anapanasati not only builds the skills, but as we develop the skills, we get great fruit and great benefit out of it. And one of the great benefits that we have is we don't have to carry around that bunch of junk anymore. So, with that as an introduction, Giannis, will you read what your question was for us so that I can stop you mid-points?
Yes, the question was, how do we continue and sustain to gladden the mind while we are doing something that requires thinking or talking with someone, since I guess the faculty of speech is, it's focused doing something.
One of the words that you use that you're not using now, you use the word formal. Do you remember, or do you read it to formal?
Yeah, formal practice, the 5
All
minutes.
right. Now, the first thing to say about that is that the Buddha never used the word formal. Where does that word come from? Why did you choose to use the word formal? What do you mean by the word formal?
Yeah, I guess formal comes from form, so keeping a form.
Okay, so you're talking now about a ritualized practice.
Yeah, the one that we talked about in the last call, about taking 5 minutes every hour and having a wholesome thought one after the other.
I would go so far as to say that very few of the people who use the word formal meditation would consider that formal. Normally, what they mean by formal is you've got to go to a special room, have special incense, have an altar, maybe have a picture of a monk or a statue of the Buddha, or maybe a monk on the stage. You separate men and women from the two sides of the room, etc., like that, and that's a formal setting where it's got a lot of ritual built into it. And so that's what I wanted to address is that the Buddha didn't give retreats, didn't mention them. They never existed in the time of the Buddha. And so the retreat setting is where that formality comes in, because it's repetitive, not in the sense of building skills. It's repetitive in the sense of structured or ritualized behavior. And so we don't need to use the word formal at all. That in fact, the very, very best time to practice is when you need it the most. Buddhadasa was really clear about that in the sense of when you are sick, that's a really good time to practice, because a lot of people will say, oh, well, I can't go to the meditation hall and do the formal practice. I'm sick now. Where the real practice is to deal with the sickness happily. So, this is an important point that I'm leading up to, is that the time to practice is when you need it. But in the beginning of practice, you need it all the time. And so we need to practice on a regular basis. We were talking about attitude, which is kind of between the feelings. In fact, we can see that the Satipatthana is set up as the body, the feelings, mental states, and then mental objects. So your thoughts are going to be mental objects, and that we use mental objects then to affect the mental state, so that we begin to have a happy, healthy attitude, which is not the same as the thoughts. And therefore, we can now go and have an activity with an attitude, a mental state of, I can handle this, no problems. I can see what's going on. And that way we can then turn the thinking process of the mind onto what we're reading while we're having a pleasant attitude, while we're having a wholesome attitude. And that if the attitude changes while we're reading, then the best thing to do is to set that reading down and go back and develop and work with our gladdening thoughts in order to brighten the mind, gladden the mind, get the mind back into a good, healthy, wholesome state so that we have those feelings of safe, secure, comfortable, and satisfied. And then we can go back to the work, go back to the reading. And so you mentioned that it would be easy enough to have the attitude, a healthy, wholesome attitude while you're cleaning house. Well, can you then continue to practice so that you can have that healthy, wholesome attitude while you're reading? And then you can have that wholesome, healthy attitude when you're dealing with the police. Yes, Agnes, go ahead.
What about if you don't really want to have wholesomeness in your life or wholesome attitudes?
You're asking that question because I don't believe you.
No, but I'm just asking. I used to think that some things I don't really want. Some of those wholesome things I didn't want before. But now when I got it, I can see the benefit of it, but I didn't understand that before. Because I didn't know what to look for and what is it about and such things.
So what you're actually now doing is you're re-advertising that we have to practice.
Okay.
You
Yeah.
have to practice in order to gain the benefits. And that I have seen it happen over and over again, that I'll tell someone exactly how to do this, how to do the Eightfold Noble Path, how to have to remember to look and to change the mind by changing our thoughts and gladdening the mind and brightening the mind and getting that attitude change. And the person will continue to ask questions, more and more questions. They never get around to actually practicing.
Could that be about not knowing? Because it used to be like that for me, because some things I didn't really want to drop. I didn't really want to get rid of it. I wanted to keep it.
Because you found some sort of security in it. One example of that would be anger, that some people like to be angry because if they stopped being angry, they would go back into a state of fear, which is even less comfortable. That in fact, anger gives a sense of power, that I can handle this. But when we practice correctly, we gain that power through non-fear, as opposed to gaining power through fear, turning it into anger. But this is a process that we have to practice so that we can see for ourselves. Ehipassiko. The Buddha says you've got to come and to practice and to see for yourself. Now, all I can do is encourage. You can see my enthusiasm, you can see my happiness, and that's all you can see. And for many or most people, that's not enough. That's not enough to start practicing. And because that's not enough, that's all they're going to get from me. I'm not going to do your practice for you. And if I did, I would be the one getting your benefits, not you. So everybody's got to do their own practice. And once you start practicing, Agnes, that's when you can see the benefit, and that you can see that, in fact, an example that I was using was anger. We can see that anger, in fact, is not useful the way that it used to be. that I can see how obstructive that feeling is. And I can also see that it's based upon fear, and that it's better to deal with the fear directly, that you don't actually want to try to remove the anger and keep the fear. You want to remove the fear so that the anger will dissipate. And by removing the fear, you're keeping the strength.
So then it comes kind of natural, right? When that comes, I just drop it because I can see I don't really want it. Yeah.
Yes,
okay.
exactly. You can see for yourself because you're gaining the benefits, as opposed to hearing a lecture or reading a book on the Dhamma or whatever like that. And a lot of people think that reading a book is kind of like we were ruined by school, because school never teaches us really to practice. I mean, some things do. I remember in high school they had things like home ec and shop, where the guys went and tore a car apart, fixed the engine, and then the home ec, the girls go and they sew and they cook and they gain skills. But most of high school is just reading a book or listening to the teacher and regurgitating it, and you're not really doing much that way. But in fact,
and there's no solution in there. It's not what I want. I'm not looking for that, really.
So the same thing is true with learning to program. No one learns to program by reading a book on programming. Nobody does. You have to actually do it. The same thing is, in fact, with music. Nobody can read a music book and learn to play Chopin by reading a book about Chopin or looking at the sheet music of Chopin. You've got to actually practice. And with the practice comes the skill. And with the skill comes the strength of mind. And with that strength of mind, now we can go around occasionally picking up dukkha and setting it back down happily. And then later we get to the point that we see the dukkha in advance and we don't bother to pick it up at all anymore, because we've got that strong strength of mind. Okay, so Giannis, go ahead with the rest of your questions so that we've gotten this start with it.
Well, I have this question that how do we know the difference between we want to do wrestling or we want to practice? Like,
Sorry, what was that?
well, I'm asking like how to know the difference between trying to wrestling or just like practice.
You do that by your own practice. You have to come to do it and see for yourself. That I can talk to you over and over again. You can listen to all 2,000 videos that we've got up there. You can listen to all the monks on YouTube. But until you do the practice, you won't really understand what they're talking about. It's like reading books about going to the gym or actually reading a golf magazine. You're not going to learn how to play golf by reading a magazine. You've got to go play golf. So this is the question that you how do you know? The answer to always to how do you know is by doing it over and over and over, practicing over and over again. Yes, Agnes, go right ahead.
No, I'm asking again. Well, it's like for me, it was a lot about that experience. I was scared to experience things. I was so cut off. I was, what's it called, closed off. And because of fear, I didn't want to see, I didn't want to feel, because I felt like I'm going to drop into that big, huge, dark hole that I was living in. So if I had some kind of glimpse of something wholesome, I started clinging to that. And
well, it's a whole lot better to cling to the wholesome than it is to cling to the unwholesome. So you were clinging to your fear, but once you started practicing to see that, in fact, you could deal with your fear, you can, in fact, change the fear by changing your attitude from an attitude of, oh, poor me, the fear, whatever I'm afraid of is going to come get me, into the attitude of whatever comes, I'm not afraid of it, and it can't get me because I'm a moving target anyway.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's it. That's it. Yeah.
So that's the practice that we have to become skilled at. And no amount of questions is going to substitute for that actual practice of changing the mind, changing our feelings, changing our state of mind, changing our attitude. This is something that we have to practice over and over again. And as we get better at it, means that we can see dukkha much clearer. We can see how heavy that thing is, and then we don't pick it up anymore. So, sorry, Giannis, back to you again.
Yeah, the question was already answered. I think it was like the last part was exactly about that. Like since like how it's different to sustain wholesome thinking when we're doing things like cleaning the house, like manual things, or reading and studying or listening to a lecture.
Okay, so read the last statement or the last sentence that you wrote in that question. Read the last sentence.
Okay. It's very easy to sustain when doing things that don't require much thinking, like cleaning the house, etc. But when I'm studying or listening or talking, it feels a bit different there.
Okay, guess what? It's not the situation that's different. It's you who have changed your attitude. It's the attitude change. You can say, oh, I can do it when it's easy, but then I can't do it when it's blah, blah. So and you can see that you've changed your attitude. So that means more practice so that you can gain that healthy, wholesome attitude and not lose it. Don't lose your attitude when you're in those situations. That's why I use the example of a cop, is because almost everybody loses it when they're dealing with the cops. Or maybe an army recruiter, or maybe a used car salesman. It's really hard to deal with people who are really aggressive. And we lose it because their job is to make you afraid. But if you got the attitude of you can't touch me, then they can't make you afraid. But that requires skill. That requires practice over and over and over again. So remember on that last part that it's not the situation really that's changed, it's your attitude that's changed. And I use the example of the cop. So you're driving, you're tooling down the road, and you're having a great time, and you see that light behind you flash, and all of a sudden the fear comes up. All of a sudden that attitude changes. And that's the most important time to practice. That's one of the most important times there is to practice, is from the time that you saw that red light until the time he's tapping on your window saying, roll down your window. From the time you see that red light, you can say, wow, this is the time to practice. I can handle this guy. We're going to be okay. Not a problem in the world. He probably is going to make up some shit anyway. Got no troubles, got no problem. Or like in the song, the landlord called, let's see, what was it? Time to pay the rent. The rent is due. And he maybe he will litigate. Oh yeah, the rent is late. The landlord says the rent is late. It's time to litigate. Don't worry. Be happy. Okay. That's the thing is that we need to practice these skills so that we don't lose it just when we need it the most. So that's the answer to your question. You have to keep practicing and keep practicing and keep practicing so you don't lose your correct attitude, your correct state of mind when you need it most.
Yes. So to keep an eye on the attitude, like
Yes,
in those situations.
That's right.
But
Pay attention to your attitude. That's part of the practice.
Then, like, I would like gladden the mind with wholesome thoughts. But if I'm reading, I either read the words or have wholesome thoughts. If I'm
All
reading
right.
a textbook.
But you can read the words with a wholesome attitude, or you can read the words with an unwholesome attitude. And you can
Right.
listen to the thoughts with a wholesome attitude, or you can listen to the thoughts with an unwholesome attitude. The attitude is separate. The state of mind is different than the thoughts that you have. Oh, Giannis, are you finished with this call? I mean, with your question?
Yes, I think the answer would be when we are reading, we pay more attention to the attitude instead of just the thoughts.
Yes. Pay attention to the attitude that you have, not the thoughts.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So, all right,
Dhammarato,
Amit,
I have
go
one
ahead.
question. So one question about this attitude part. So I kind of notice time to time when the practice is going well. So you have these 3 steps. So step 1 is sati, to remember. Number 2 is to look, and then number 3 is to make a change. But when the practice is going well, then actually looking and I think when the attitude is already positive, then looking and making change, these 2 and 3 steps are kind of pretty simultaneous. Would you agree with that?
Yes. Yes. And what we've been talking about today also is step 4, the Sammasankappa, is that you use those wholesome, healthy thoughts in order to change your attitude. So that you have that winner's attitude, the feeling of success, changes into, or the feeling of satisfaction then changes into the feeling of success, into the feeling of I can do this. Ivan had a question, and his question, he says, was about consciousness, but he quoted a sutta. And so it's basically 4 or 5 or 6 questions, or not questions, but various ways of saying the same thing that various monks had. So can you read the first one?
Yeah. Should I say like now at the time after the meal or return from alms round, several senior mendicants sat together in the pavilion, and this discussion came among them. Reverence, this was said by the Buddha in the way of the far shore in the questions of Mettaya. And this is the thoughtful one who has known both ends and is not stuck in the middle. He is a great man, I declare. He has escaped the seamstress here. But what is one end? What's the second end? What's the middle? And who is the seamstress? Is that how you pronounce it? Seamstress, yeah. When this was said, one of the mendicants said to the senior mendicants, contact, reverence, is one end. The origin of contact is the second end. The cessation of contact is the middle. And craving is the seamstress. For craving with one of being regenerate in one state of existence or another, that's how a mendicant directly knows what should be directly known and completely understand what should be completely understood. Knowing and understanding thus then make an end of suffering in this very life. That's the first one. And the second one is another monk said to another monk, the past, reverend, is one end, the future is second end, the present is the middle, and craving is a seamstress. That's how a mendicant directly knows an end of suffering in this very life. That's the second one. And the third one, which they go on and on. Another monk said, shall I continue? Pleasant feeling reverence is one end, painful feeling is the second end, neutral feeling is the middle, and craving is interest. That's how a mendicant directly knows an end of suffering in this very life. Guys, should I continue? Yeah. So the fourth one is the same thing. It's just a different context. It's like the same name, reverence is one end, form is the second end, consciousness is the middle, and craving is the interest. That's how a mendicant directly knows an end of suffering in this very life. And the fifth one is the sixth interior sense field, reverence are one end. The sixth exterior sense field are the second end. Consciousness is the middle, and craving is the interest. That's how a mendicant directly knows an end of suffering in this very life. And this very last one, substantial reality, reverence is one end. The origin of substantial reality is the second end. The cessation of substantial reality is the middle. Craving is the interest. For craving with one to being regenerated in one state of existence or another. That's how a mendicant directly knows, what should be directly known, yada yada yada, and make an end of suffering in this very life. And when all this was said, they say, each one of us has spoken from the heart. Come, reverence, let's go to the Buddha and inform him about this. As he answers, so we will remember it. And they go to the Buddha and say, Sir, who has spoken well? And then the Buddha said, Mendicant, you have spoken well in a way. However, this is what I was referring to in the way to the far shore, in the question of Mitaya, when I said, the sage has known both ends and is not stuck in the middle. He is a great man, I declare. He has escaped the interest here. Listen and apply your mind well. I will speak. Yes, sir, they replied. Buddha said this. So this is what the Buddha said. Contact.
On the white side. Yeah, okay.
Dhammarato, I had read through the six of the what.
Okay, all right. So let's take it then from the fact. Did anybody notice that the first one on that list in that sutta and the last one on that list are the same one? Read the first one again.
Okay.
Just the beginning, the one extreme, the other extreme in the middle.
Okay. Contact is one end. Original contact is the second end. Cessation of contact is the middle.
All right. And what did the Buddha say?
Contact mendicant is one end. The original contact is the second end. The cessation of contact is the middle. Yeah, same thing.
Okay, it's the same thing. Now, that indicates something. What it indicates is, actually, there's several indications there that indicate that this was not a conversation with a bunch of monks and the Buddha, that this was done later, probably in the time of Ashoka. And it has slightly different language. Also, in there, it notice that the Buddha says that these are basically all the same thing. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. So the most important thing then is to understand that this is a teaching about the Paticca Samuppada, and that contact is in fact they're using the term seamstress here, that weaves the self. The way of saying it is that if there is clinging done, then that it needs a cling or. All
Yes.
right. So the birth of the self, or the reinvention of the self, or the regeneration of the self, is due to clinging. And when there is no clinging, there is no selfishness. There is no self there.
Yes.
All right. So this is the important point of each one of those, is that this is the part of Paticca Samuppada that goes from upadana, the clinging, into bhavana. That in fact the word bhavana is actually there in the Pali, that is translated into regeneration.
Oh, yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
the regeneration then of your selfishness, which is the dukkha. Okay. And it talks about a regeneration of one into existence of one kind or another. So if the clinging is due to fear and anger, then we are reborn or regenerated as to one who is angry. And we are also regenerated into one who clings, etc., like that. So that means then that personality is not a fixed thing. It depends upon the clinging and the manner and the method of clinging. Have I lost you again?
No, here you.
Okay. So do a little movement for me so that I can see that you're not frozen. All right. So this is the first thing. Now, you'll also know, if you remember Paticca Samuppada, that contact is what causes feelings, and feelings cause liking, and liking causes loving, or I gotta have it. That's the upadana, or the clinging. Is another way we can say is I'm loving it, and I become the lover because I love it. So going back then to the point of contact is at one end, and the origin of contact is at the other end. What do you think is the origin of the contact? Well, the immediate origin of the contact is, in fact, the salayatana, the story that we tell.
Oh.
But ultimately, the source of the contact is the consciousness of receiving input. And then the end of contact is the perception or the storytelling. Okay, so what is consciousness then? Consciousness is dependently arisen, depending upon the form that we see and how we name that form. So the form is what the eye see, the eye consciousness, and then we tell a story about it and give it a name, and that name then is the salayatana, which is a different form of consciousness. This time it's on the inside, the internal, and that gives rise to what contacts us, which brings feeling, which brings clinging. So if we stop telling stories, then we stop having feelings and we stop having contact. Okay, so all of these things are the same thing, but it's done in a way that sounds almost like a Zen koan that's trying to trick you. But basically what it's really doing is it's trying to get the students who's reading this is to figure it out, that this is a puzzle. And it's a puzzle based upon Paticca Samuppada. And in all of these cases, they're talking about the consciousness, perception, and contact that's caused by the story that perception says. And so when we stop contact, we stop feelings. And when there's no feelings, there's no clinging. If there's no clinging, there's no selfishness that arises. And so the answer to each and every one of these is to stop whatever is in the middle. And in every case, what's in the middle is perception, the storytelling. And so rather than us going into great detail, I would highly recommend that every student gets this sutta out and go through it line by line to make sure that it is in fact perception that's caught in the middle. And when we're free from being caught in the middle, then our perception doesn't lead then to the story, which leads to the contact, which leads then eventually to the clinging, which gives rise to the selfishness, the clinger.
Dhammarato, there's one particular one that really caught my interest, which is, let's say pleasant feeling is one end, painful feeling is the second end, and neutral feeling is the middle. It sounds like when people don't know what to do in the neutral, which is in the middle, that's where they bounce between.
Right. I didn't have a chance to look at the Pali, but I assume that it does not have the word neutral there.
Yeah.
What it either has is a sukha, a dukkha vedana, or sukha, dukkha vedana. Okay? And what that means is that it's a mixed feeling, not a neutral feeling.
Yeah.
This is one of the major points of bad translation, is translating the Pali sukha, dukkha Dhamma, which is both sukha and dukkha, and canceling it out as if there was no feeling at all. That in fact, what we could say then, that when we bring it to the end of feelings, then we're changing it from a mixed bag of feelings into no feeling at all, because we're not telling ourselves any stories. To where the mixed bag is because our story is of confusion. Okay, does that make sense for you? It sounds like that it does, Ivan.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. So just to repeat this real quick, like when they say name is one end, form is the second end, consciousness is the middle, craving is the interest, and it sounds like when people he or she is trying to figure out the consciousness so badly, and that's why the dukkha is there. I don't get it.
I'm not quite sure what you're asking. Can you state it again?
Yeah. I just don't understand the consciousness in the middle part. Like, I still don't really.
Consciousness is never generally in the middle. Generally, what's in the middle is perception, which is storytelling. Okay, that on one of them is used rupa and nama.
Yeah.
Right. Well, what's in between nama and rupa? Well, rupa is in fact the object that we can see, and nama is the story that we tell about it. And again, what's in the middle between nama and rupa is in fact nama rupa, the storytelling perception. That's why the Buddha says that they're all correct, is because always in the middle is going to be perception. And when, according to Sutra number 111, one by one as they occur, that when Sariputta got to being able to stop the storytelling, that was the end of the feelings, including the end of the what's called neutral feeling, which is actually a mixed feeling. And we bring it to the end of feeling. So there's a huge difference between what they call neutral feeling and the end of feeling.
Yeah.
Because neutral feeling is going to bring up confusion, and confusion is going to bring up doubt and clinging. I gotta know, I gotta know, I gotta know, as opposed to a feeling of nothing there. There's nothing.
Yeah.
Another, go ahead.
Yeah, something you mentioned about the practice early on. I feel like usually people, because they are in neutral, like a mixed bag of feeling, and that's when they don't practice, because they feel like they gotta know more, or something is wrong, or whatever, rather than just seeing that's dukkha right there, like, like rather than spinning the story, just know that that's dukkha and time to practice.
Though it's not clearly stated, it's logical, you can figure it out for yourself, that in fact a mixed bag of feelings is more than likely going to predominate. That there's going to be more mixed bag feelings than there is going to be out and out disgust or dukkha feelings. And then the third one, that's in fact the least common, the least obvious, is the sukha feelings. This is why we're actually working on bringing up sukha feelings, is because primarily the mind is stuck in either dukkha feelings or in confused feelings. And confusion is the main reason why people don't practice.
Yeah.
And one of the statements that they can say is, "Oh, why bother?"
Yeah.
Oh, why bother? Which means that they're confused about whether it's going to be of benefit or not.
Yes.
Okay. So another example in there would be past and future and present. Okay. Well, there is the case that, in fact, we can see that sankhara is always the past, which predates or happens at the point of time then of consciousness, and then contact, when it hits you, that's into the future, but in the present is the storytelling, the present.
Yeah.
And when we stop telling the stories, that means that we put an end to that future of contact that leads to feelings, that leads to upadana, clinging, which leads into the self, the selfishness.
Yes.
Okay, so this is a sutta that actually is dealing with paticca samuppada in a fairly detailed manner of giving people, but they're using different language. For instance, there is one that says the internal sense base is at one end and the external sense base is at the other end. That's exactly the same thing as the nama and rupa. That rupa is at one end, which is the end of perception, and then the internal sense base is, in fact, the salayatana, or the story that's being told. And guess what's between them? Anybody got a clue? Anybody want to make a guess? How about you,
Confusion.
Timo? What's in the middle between the internal sense base and the external sense base? You said it several times in the past 5 minutes.
Perception.
Perception, yes. Perception. Perception is what changes the external sense base, the object, the rupa, into the name or the story, which is the internal sense base. So you could also then say, originally your question, Ivan, was what is consciousness? The answer to that is there are two kinds of consciousness. The external sense base and the internal sense base when they contact us. Okay? That in fact consciousness requires that rupa, and it also requires the eyes. If it's dark and you can't see the rupa, then there is no consciousness of that rupa.
Yeah.
And when you don't perceive that rupa, then you don't name it. So this sutta is repetition over and over again of a whole bunch of different ways of looking at what happens between consciousness and the contact that consciousness makes with us. And always that consciousness then leads us to feelings, and the feelings then bring on the upadana, the seamstress, who knits us alive together, regenerating existence.
Yes.
So let's find out. Christina, what do you get from this sutta?
There's a good practice now to think about
just perception. If it's there or not, if you don't see it, it's not there. But you have to look and you have to continue to practice.
That's the whole point. Then we have to keep looking and keep practicing and looking at the stories that we tell ourselves. Keep looking at that storytelling process. That we made that shit up. So, Timo, what do you think?
I just try to look at it in real time, and it seems like a good practice. But intellectually, theoretically, I can't say that I get the suit. But yeah, but I mean, I can't express it, but it did something for me for sure. But
Okay.
yeah, it's just about more looking, like you said.
Mm-hmm. So, in that regard, then, when we start to practice anapanasati, when we're practicing looking and changing, what is it then, in fact, is being changed?
So for example, the attitude.
Actually, is perception again. This is a trick question. What's being changed is perception. And if we can learn to control perception, then we can learn to stop. And so by changing our story, that means that we're changing the storytelling from I hate this into doesn't bother, nothing to it. But when we said, oh, this is a big problem, we made that story up. And when we can see that I made that story up, we can say, oh, well, I can make up a different story. And as we gain skill in making up and changing the stories, intentionally changing the stories, we can stop telling stories. And when we stop telling stories, that's the end of the clinging. So, Amal, what do you think?
Yeah. So I think it's a really good practice to keep looking at the stories that we tell ourselves and to keep making the change because they keep coming up again and again.
There's no end to it until
There's
you
no
bring
end
it
to
to an end. So, Paul, what do you think?
I had a question. So
Okay.
usually consciousness is said as eye consciousness, ear consciousness, etc. So does the
Mhm.
Namarupa process or the perception process, is that where these stories are, or sorry, these individual consciousnesses are put together into a story? Would that be a
Yes,
correct?
yes. That in fact, that story or the part when we're talking about rupa is on the outside, the real. And then the nama is the story that's being told. And so nama rupa is the process of converting the reality that's seen into a story about the reality that's being seen.
So the same thing happens within Salyatana as well,
That's the
because it's
Salayatana
internal.
is the nama,
Okay, understood. Thank
which
you.
is also the internal sense base, which we then
Yes.
become conscious of, and that's what contacts us.
Understood. Thank you.
It really is simple. once you go through the steps and can begin to see. And so this is one of the reasons why we want to practice, is because in the practice of changing the story that we're telling ourselves, you begin to change those thoughts. We begin to see that we can make that up. In fact, we do make it up. In fact, we're constantly making stuff up based upon the input that we're receiving. And so we can then begin to change it consciously. We begin to own it and take control of it. So remember that I said that the right time to practice is when you need it most. When you need it most is when you're not watching and you're making up a story that you don't like cops are dangerous. And you can make up a different story like cops are okay. They're good friends. You be friends with them, they'll be friends with you. So
just wanted to sorry, just wanted to add that the times when we need the practice the most is also when we feel a lot of resistance to it. Just because the mind builds up the story and it tells you that okay, I don't need to change. I'm correct right now, and there's a lot of resistance to it, is what I find.
but that resistance is just the old habit.
Yeah.
And so this is why, especially in the beginning, it takes effort. The effort to change those stories from something unwholesome, which is familiar, we're used to it, and change it into something that's more valuable, more wholesome. You can imagine, in fact, when the guy got stopped by the cops, he wants to let that cop have it. He's been building up all his resentments about police forever, and now he's got one in front of him, and he's really going to dump. That's not a good idea. Now is the time to practice. So, Robert, what do you have to say?
Yeah, thank you again for the reminder on practicing to changing the stories. I'm trying to do that. Thank you.
You can do that. You can change that story right now from trying to actually doing it.
Okay.
All right. So who do we have left? Krishna, do you have anything to say?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Well, just one question, I guess. I was talking with a friend about practicing being okay and wholesome thoughts, and he caught me off guard with the question, "What if I don't know how to be okay?"
That is an unwholesome thought. What if I don't know how to be okay is, in fact, that mixed bag of feelings. And of course, everybody knows how to be okay. But in a way, you could say that Dhammarato calls that a lie. We're lying to ourselves when we don't know how to practice. It's easy enough to recognize that we can change that. We're changing the way that we look at things and changing our feelings and changing all kinds of stuff all the time. And so when we say, I don't know how to change or I don't know what to do, that's actually just that feeling state of a doubt, that feeling state of mixed bag of I'm not sure, I don't know. And it's just a feeling. And so the answer to that is, never mind, start again. Come back and actually practice correctly to change it from an I don't know how into, wow, this is great. I can change. But everybody's got to do that for themselves. No teacher or any guru or any school teacher, any good friend, nobody can do that for you. You've got to do it for yourself.
Hey, thank you.
Okay. So I understand.
All right, go ahead.
So it just we practice when we need it the most, but we need it the most when we add them when we see it. Like we have to see it that there is shit happening. Then
Yeah,
we
and you
need to
can change
practice
your attitude right now from "I can do this."
to I can do it and
You
take
can
it
do
for
it.
enough.
Okay, so let's put some energy into it. Let's put some enthusiasm into it. Yes, you can do this.
Even to study or everything in their life, a lot of aspect in their life. Even just doing nothing can be unwholesome if you let the Mara get you.
Well, in that case, it's not doing nothing, is it?
Yeah.
The doing nothing is really wholesome, but very few people can do nothing. Almost everybody is doing a bunch of crap, and they call it nothing.
Thanks. Yeah.
All right, does anybody else have anything to say?
Yeah, I have one thing to say. Well, like people work, people do something. What is the wholesome way to remember? To remind ourselves.
Well, the thing to remember is you can change. And Shepherd, right now you can change. Do you everybody see what he's doing? I don't know if I. Okay, so now you're smiling. You just changed.
Yeah, I should congrats.
So I prompt you for that. And so let that cell phone next time, every time you hear that cell phone ring, you say, "Hot dog, I can smile. I can come out of my crap." All right, Monkey, why don't you take this thing? Thank you all for staying, even though we've had a lot of breakups with our internet, but you hung in there. Good for you.
Yeah, glad to have so many noble friends that can just take it easy and not worry. So yeah, thank you all for being here today. This has been a splendid talk. If maybe something didn't click, that's okay. You can listen to the talk again once it's posted on YouTube. If you're watching this on YouTube, go ahead and check out the video description. There you can find links to OpenSanghaFoundation.org and also a link to join this Discord server. So yeah, come make some new friends, come hang out, and take it easy.
Be happy. So I'm going to leave now, and I invite everybody here to stay and to make friends with each other, talk about what we've talked about. If there's any more doubts or any questions, you can discuss it with each other, that someone else may in fact be able to say it in a way that you understand him better than you do me. Agnes is really good at this. She knows what she's doing. She's been doing it for a long time, and she's successful at it. Ivan too. Mikey too. Hemo's getting in there too. So there's some people here that can help you to understand better. So I'm going to see you now.
Thank you,
Ta-ta.
Dhammarato. Thank you, Mikey.
Thank you.